You've always assumed there's just one you in there, one voice, one identity, one steady narrator guiding your thoughts, making your choices, telling the story of your life like a clean, continuous line. But that's not what's happening, not even close. Because if you listen carefully, really carefully, you might start to notice something strange. A hesitation before a decision, a sudden urge that contradicts what you just decided, a quiet argument playing out in your head that no one else can hear. Part of you wants to stay disciplined, another part wants to give in. One voice says, "This is who I am." Another whispers, "But what if it's not?" And somehow, both feel like you. It's subtle at first, easy to ignore. You smooth it over, tell yourself it's just overthinking, just mood, it's personality. But what if it's not? What if that feeling, that internal tug-of-war isn't a flaw, but a clue? Because beneath the surface, your mind isn't a single, unified voice. It's a crowded room, different systems, different impulses, different versions of you, all running at the same time, each with their own priorities, their own logic, their own agenda. And the strangest part, they're all competing for control, pretending to be the same person, which raises a question that's hard to shake once you think about it. If multiple yous are making decisions inside your own mind, then who, exactly, is in charge? In the 1960s, a neuroscientist named Roger Sperry began studying patients who had undergone a radical procedure, the cutting of the corpus callosum, the thick bundle of fibers connecting the brain's left and right hemispheres. The surgery was meant to treat severe epilepsy, and medically, it worked. But psychologically, something bizarre started to happen. These patients looked completely normal. They could talk, walk, laugh, live their lives. To everyone around them, they were still a single, unified person. But inside their minds, there were signs of two separate streams of consciousness. In one famous experiment, Sperry's colleague, Michael Gazzaniga, presented images to each hemisphere separately. Because of how the visual system is wired, the left half of the brain only saw what appeared in the right visual field, and the right half only saw what appeared in the left. When the word key was shown to the right hemisphere, the patient couldn't say what they saw, because language is typically controlled by the left hemisphere. But here's the twist. Their left hand, controlled by the right hemisphere, could reach out and pick up a key from a table of objects correctly. So one part of the brain knew the answer, the other part had no idea. And yet, when asked why they picked up the key, the speaking half of the brain didn't say, "I don't know." It made something up, a story, a justification, a clean, confident explanation that felt true, even though it wasn't. Gazzaniga later called this the interpreter, a system in the brain that constantly tries to create a coherent narrative out of fragmented processes. In other words, your brain isn't just thinking, it's storytelling, and it's doing it in real time, stitching together the outputs of multiple independent systems, motion, logic, memory, instinct into something that feels like a single, unified you. But the unity is an illusion, because behind the scenes, different neural networks are constantly competing. One part of you wants immediate reward, another plays the long game, one reacts emotionally, another tries to regulate, one clings to habit while another pushes for change, and they don't always agree. In fact, most of your internal conflict, every moment of doubt, hesitation, contradictions, evidence of this quiet competition, not a single self struggling, but multiple selves negotiating, which leads to a strange realization. That voice in your head, the one you trust as you, might just be the winner of an argument you didn't even know was happening. To really see how deep this goes, you have to zoom in on the architecture of the brain, not as a single commander, but as a network of rival departments, each convinced it should be in charge. There's the fast system, ancient, emotional, impulsive. It reacts before you can think, tagging experiences with fear, desire, urgency. Then there's the slower system, deliberate, analytical, careful. It steps in after trying to make sense of what just happened. Psychologist Daniel Kahneman famously described this as System 1 and System 2. But in reality, it's even messier than that. It's not just two systems, it's dozens. Networks layered on top of networks, each processing a different slice of reality. And here's the twist. They don't report to a central you. There is no final boss in your brain. Instead, what you experience as decision-making is more like a silent competition. Neural coalitions form and dissolve in milliseconds. One network gains enough activation to cross a threshold, and suddenly, a thought appears in your consciousness. It feels like you chose it, but the choice was already made. In experiments by Benjamin Libet in the 1980s, participants were asked to make a simple decision, like moving their finger whenever they felt like it. At the same time, their brain activity was being recorded. What Libet found was deeply unsettling. The brain showed a readiness potential. A spike of activity, indicating a decision, was being prepared hundreds of milliseconds before the person became consciously aware of choosing to move. In other words, your brain decides before you do. Consciousness doesn't initiate the action, it narrates it. So that feeling of being a single, unified self making deliberate choices. It's more like a press conference after the fact. A polished explanation delivered by whatever system won the internal race. And suddenly, the illusion becomes clear. You're not a single voice speaking. You're the echo of a process. A constantly updating story, assembled from competing signals, stitched together so seamlessly that it feels like one continuous identity. But underneath that smooth surface, there's a crowd. So if you're not just one you, what are you? Maybe the answer isn't as chaotic as it sounds. Because even though your mind is made of competing systems, impulses, memories, emotions, predictions, it doesn't feel like chaos. It feels like continuity. A single thread running through your life, connecting who you were, who you are, and who you're becoming. Thread is the story, not a lie, but not the full truth either. It's the narrative your brain constructs to keep everything coherent, a kind of internal glue that binds all these separate processes into something stable enough to function, to decide, to act. Without it, you wouldn't feel like a person. You'd feel like fragments. And in rare cases, we actually see what happens when that glue weakens. In certain neurological conditions or extreme psychological states, people report feeling detached from themselves, as if their thoughts don't belong to them, as if multiple identities are surfacing without a clear center. Not because they've lost themselves, but because the illusion of unity is starting to crack. And yet, here's the strange beauty in all of this. You don't need to be a single, perfectly consistent entity to be real. In fact, maybe being human has never been about being one thing. Maybe it's about being many things at once, sent somehow, against all odds, moving in the same direction. Your discipline and your desire, your fear and your courage, your past self and your future self, all negotiating, all shaping the path forward. And the you that you feel, that steady voice, that sense of identity, it's not the ruler of the system, it's the agreement. A fragile, ever-changing consensus between all the versions of you that exist beneath the surface. So the next time you feel conflicted, divided, unsure of what you really want, don't rush to silence it. Listen closely, because that tension, it's not a flaw in your mind. It's proof that there's more than one you in there, trying to become something whole.